Greetings everyone, Gaijin Goombah here, and welcome to the next live edition of Goombah Rage. Now, for those of you that saw my first video, yeah, that really was some raging, but this episode, it's not so much. It's going to be a bit more critical thinking about things and me being opinionated and not necessarily ranting and raving. So what I'm going to be talking about for this particular episode is gaming in the dying Muse, and I know that may or may not make a whole lot of sense, but, well, let's kind of dive in. And I'd like to start off with my thoughts on the next-gen consoles, because just by default, a lot of people have been asking me my thoughts on the whole thing. So let me just run down the list, starting with Microsoft. I've just never been a fan of the Xbox, just in general. If you were a fan of the Xbox and still are a fan of the Xbox, I hold no ill will towards you. It's just, there was just too much realism, too much brown, too much shooting. You know, I respect Halo. I don't play it all that much. I respect it. But there's just... it felt dull in a very weird way, and I know that's really impossible to explain, and maybe it has to do with my age. But it directly is related to the subject that I'm going to be talking about. On the PS4, I thought Sony did a really good job at E3 presenting what the PS4 has to offer, and I don't begrudge it one bit, but I probably won't end up buying one. Because again, it's kind of the same problem of everything is real. A little too real. And it's kind of boring for me, and I know that doesn't make any sense, especially with as many games coming out for the PS4 that are as far from realistic as possible. A lot of science fiction focus, some medieval focus, and so on and so forth, but everything just looks really real, and it's just not what pulls me in. And again, I'll get to more to the point. And as far as the Wii goes, I still own mine, and I'm just sitting here waiting for Nintendo to put out the really good first-party titles that they said they were. So, yeah, I'm just kind of at a limbo right now when it comes to next-gen consoles. If anything, I'm playing the crap out of my 3DS, so there's that. And, a lot of this has to do with, in my opinion, the death of player creativity, player imagination, and even some critical thinking. And I know a lot of you are going to automatically accuse me of being just nostalgia-blinded about this whole issue, but I like to think that this isn't the case. Even though I would argue that nostalgia alone is a great reason to enjoy something, and that's for another Goombah Rage segment. But let me explain what I'm talking about. So, what did old games do? At least in my opinion, what did they do? Well, first of all, everyone knows how absolutely limited these people were. The game developers and publishers, so on and so forth, I mean. They had very little to work with, but because of that, I think some really good things came out of it. It's kind of like what Hollywood is doing as well, you know? You think about all these old great movies, and the thing that made them so good is that there was something there in front of the people watching the movie. And even that's not really a good justification, but there's something about making the audience imagine what's going on. It has that certain special magic to it, and retro gaming does that. Not just did it, but still does it. One of the things that come to mind is critical thinking. A lot of people say that retro gaming is really, really hard, and in a lot of situations it is. But what I think that did was that it really made the player think about where to go and what to do. And as Sequelitis has showed us time and time again, really good conveyance can really make or break a game no matter how simple it is. Mega Man was a good example of teaching the player as they play in very, very subtle ways. Granted, though, there still was an amount of responsibility on the player to think about it. Problem solving is the other thing that came to mind, even as late as the Super Nintendo era, with Mega Man X. Trying to figure out how to get it out of that ditch. You had to really think about what you could do. You had to experiment with your surroundings, and I just don't think games do that anymore. If anything, the Miiverse kind of proves that gamers today don't really think about what it is they need to do next. They just kind of get their handheld and move on to the next area. And I know that doesn't sound fair, and maybe it isn't fair, but it's still very disheartening as a retro gamer for someone who, having grown up with these games, feels like they've been blessed with the ability to be creative, imaginative, and so on and so forth. And that kind of brings me to the next idea. Poor graphics were absolutely wonderful for imagination and the reimagining of everything about a game. You know, when I look at fan art or remixed music, so much of it is the old retro gaming music. And I personally think one of the big reasons for that is because games back then were already so limited in what they were able to do that it was a muse to the gamer about recreating it. Because it was so poor, not necessarily in quality, but with what it could do, it allowed the player to reimagine and redesign everything about it. And people did that in fan art, they do it in music remixes, and that's something I don't see anymore. You know, I don't see remixes of modern game music or modern game design because it's already presented to you. You know, and this is kind of what I'm talking about, is that I just don't like realism because it doesn't stimulate thought. Not really. It impresses the brain. It makes you go ooh and ah, but it doesn't really go any further than that. And that's something that I just kind of don't like. And even to an extent, my beloved Nintendo, they're kind of getting to the point where everything is concrete. Designs are absolutely concrete. When everything was pixelated, the player had the ability to reimagine and rethink it, all these different things. You know, Miyamoto himself said that the reason he never gave characters any voices for quite some time is because he wanted the player to imagine what they were for themselves. That's why silent protagonists worked really well, because you could imagine and create all that you wanted. And here's a good example. If you think I'm wrong, look at the reception of Other M, and I hate to bang on about that game, but it's such a good point. Samus was a silent protagonist up until that time, and once she got a voice, people couldn't think about her in the way that they perceived her. They had to perceive her in the way that the traditional canon was building her up in the Japanese comics and so on and so forth. So that was gone. That creativity was gone. And it was a death of a muse. And really, I don't know what else to say about it, because that's just the whole kit and caboodle right there. Is that, well, when it comes to the big three, Nintendo is still the closest to being really imaginative in design and things of that nature. But as I stated before, it's already starting to feel like everything is too defined, and that a player really can't think about and create in their own mind their own ideas of what these characters are, what these worlds are, and things like that. And maybe that's just me living in the past, but it was because of that I've been able to become a really hard critical thinker, and someone who just imagines things from either barely anything or nothing at all. So I give old school gaming a lot of credit for developing those skills. My real last hope in all of this is the indie game scene, because it's very, very obvious that they're working with fairly limited technology and a fairly limited budget. And because of that, I feel like I can imagine things or reimagine things. And I promise you, when stuff like Mercenary Kings and Shovel Knight come out, there's gonna be fan art up the butt. There's gonna be all kinds of musical remixes, and my point will remain valid. I'm just not really mad, but saddened and a little disappointed, because everything is just becoming so real. And when things become real, it's very hard for them to be reimagined. Now, there are exceptions to, actually there are quite a few exceptions to that, but I don't know. I just feel like we're losing something really special in this whole process of modernization and HD graphics and whatnot. So while it may be futile for me to complain about this kind of problem, I guess, it's still worth noting that there's a lot of merit in retro gaming, and there's a lot of merit in the indie game design that borrow heavily from it. So I just hope you all keep that in mind. But until next time, this is Gaijin Goombah, signing out.